Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mr. Storyteller. Before you dive into tonight's nightmare, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax.
There's something unsettling about Walmart late at night. Maybe it's the fluorescent lights that buzz too loud in the silence, or the way the shelves cast long shadows when most people are asleep. But if you ask any overnight worker at a 24-hour location, they'll tell you it's more than that. They've seen things. Ask Marcus, a former night stalker in a small town just outside Texarkana. He started working the graveyard shift after losing his day job in construction. Said it paid the bills and came with fewer people, less hassle. But he never made it a full month. He said it started with small things. Mannequins moved when he wasn't looking, stacks of soup cans that collapsed for no reason, the loudspeaker turning on by itself, emitting static or whispering sounds nobody could trace. But then it escalated. He was in aisle 14, household goods, when he heard what sounded like a baby crying. Not the tinny shrill of a toy, but a real, wet, miserable wail echoing through the store. He radioed to his manager, Becky, asking if someone had brought a child inside during the off hours. She answered flatly, no one else was in the store. Just the night crew. He checked the security camera feed. Nothing. That same night, he passed the toy aisle and every motion-activated toy, every single one, lit up at once. Dolls blinked, mechanical dogs barked, and a Tickle Me Elmo cackled like it had lost its mind. He bolted. Becky told him it happens sometimes. This building's just weird, she said. Don't let it get to you. That didn't help when Marcus found footprints the next day. Small, bare footprints on the dusty top shelves of aisle 7, 10 feet off the ground. No ladder nearby, nothing broken or disturbed, just prints that led to the edge of the shelf and stopped cold. He quit the next night after the power went out while he was in the freezer. The door locked behind him. The generator didn't kick in. He was trapped for 15 minutes in pitch black, in sub-zero cold, while something whispered to him through the vents. Don't turn around, it said. It's right behind you. He didn't turn around. When the power came back, he ran. Didn't even grab his last paycheck. But Marcus wasn't the only one. In Michigan, a young woman named Cassie worked the overnight cleaning crew. She was alone in the back hallway near the employee lounge when the lights flickered. The soda machine started whirring, then spit out 3 cans in a row, none of which she'd paid for. The last one burst open as it hit the ground, and the dark liquid spelled out one word, run. At first, she thought it was a prank, but when she told her supervisor, he went pale. That's the same word Jorge saw before he vanished, he said. Jorge was another cleaner who'd gone missing 2 weeks prior. Left all his gear behind, his phone too, never clocked out. Security footage showed him walking into the stockroom. He never came out. Cassie checked the feed herself. Sure enough, Jorge pushed open the stockroom door, looked over his shoulder, stepped inside, and then the footage cut to static. For 11 seconds. When it resumed, the door was still swinging. New Jorge, they searched the stockroom top to bottom. He wasn't there. But they did find something under the far shelf, wedged into the corner. His badge. Bent in half. Another location in Arizona had a story that went even darker. A woman named Felicia was shopping around 2 a.m. She was a regular insomniac known by name to most of the workers. She liked to wander, but one night she never left. Security found her cart abandoned by the changing rooms. The cameras showed her entering, then nothing. The recording glitched the moment she walked into the stall. Not just one camera, all of them. Like something didn't want to be seen. The next morning, they opened the stall door. It was empty, except for her shoes, neatly placed side by side, and a note that read, I'm still here. Don't open the mirror. They thought it was a joke until a night manager named Tom swore he saw her reflection days later. Not her walking around, just her reflection, flickering in the mirror of the employee restroom long after closing. He quit 2 days later, said he saw her waving at him through the glass, mouthing something he didn't want to repeat. The mirrors in that Walmart were removed soon after. Corporate reason? Renovation. There's one story, though, that gets told more than any other. The one in Mississippi. A small-town Walmart, nothing fancy. But the security footage went viral before corporate managed to scrub it from the internet. A tall figure, easily 7 feet, walked slowly through the clothing section at 3:13 a.m. The footage was black and white, grainy, but the thing's proportions were wrong. Arms too long, head tilted permanently sideways, no facial features, just a smooth patch where the face should be. It didn't trip any motion sensors, didn't show up in person. The only way people knew it was there was through the cameras. One brave stalker, Adrian, decided to follow the path it took through the store. He used the footage to trace every step. Said he just wanted to prove it was fake. But halfway through his walk, he started vomiting. He said the air changed, got thicker like he was breathing through syrup. Then he heard it, humming, low, discordant like a broken music box. He turned the corner into the electronics aisle and screamed. Said the TVs, all of them, had turned on by themselves. Every screen showed his face, live, but behind him was a shadow. Tall, still, head tilted. He whipped around. Nothing. The feed, when they checked it, showed him alone, standing still. But his eyes on the footage were rolled back, all white. His mouth was open like he was screaming, but the audio was silent. Every feed, same image. Adrian was hospitalized, never came back. They say he talks to people who aren't there now, mentions a place behind the shelves, says there's something waiting there, something that watches. Not every Walmart has stories like this, but the ones that do. Ask any employee who worked nights and left early. They won't talk about it much, but if they do, they'll say it always starts the same way. Things in the wrong place, whispering vents, static-filled radios, and sometimes people vanish. There was one in Pennsylvania where the back offices had a locked room, no key, no explanation, just a blank metal door with no handle. People joked it was a storage closet, but no one ever saw it open. One new hire, curious, decided to try and pry it open. He brought tools, spent an hour working the seams, said he could hear faint breathing from the other side. Then the power cut out. When it came back, the door was ajar, the tools were on the floor, the new hire was gone. They sealed the room the next day, plastered over it, denied it was ever there. But some workers still swear late at night you can hear knocking behind the break room wall. There's a reason overnight shifts at Walmart have such high turnover, a reason why cameras sometimes malfunction between 3 and 4 a.m., why managers rotate stores often, especially the ones in quiet towns, a reason why so many workers leave without collecting their last check. They know something moves through those aisles, something not caught by the naked eye, something that watches through security monitors and mirrors, that waits behind stockroom shelves and locked doors, something that hums lullabies to the people who stay too long. If you ever find yourself shopping late, especially after midnight, pay attention. Don't trust what you see in reflections. Don't follow the sound of crying. And if you feel like something is behind you, don't turn around. Just leave your cart. Walk out the front door and don't go back. Some prices just aren't worth it.
Story number 2.
The ocean has always been a place of mystery, beauty, and quiet terror. For every story of paradise beaches and turquoise waters, there's another that sailors, divers, and fishermen whisper only after too many drinks. Stories not told in books or documentaries. Stories that feel too real to be fiction, too strange to be explained. This is one of them. In the summer of 2013, 4 friends, James, Darren, Kelly, and Monique, chartered a private boat to explore the deep waters off the coast of the Azores. They weren't tourists. They were oceanographers, experienced and cautious. They'd been to some of the most remote underwater trenches and documented species never before seen by the public. The trip was a mix of work and adventure, focused on deep-sea recording equipment they'd been testing. That trip was their last together. James was the first to go missing. It was the 3rd night. The sea was eerily calm, the sky perfectly black above them. No wind, no waves, just the gentle rock of the ocean. Their boat, the Thalassa, drifted at the edge of a trench so deep it didn't show up on older maps. They'd picked it because satellite sonar suggested it was at least 8,000 meters deep, deeper than the Mariana Trench in parts. It had no name. The locals just called it O Buraco Preto, the black hole. They dropped their new sound equipment, an ultra-low-frequency hydrophone meant to pick up deep-sea vocalizations. The sounds it captured were strange from the start. Clicks and wails too long to be whales, too deep to be man-made. One sound in particular played back as a near-infrasonic rumble that made Kelly's chest vibrate. It repeated every 16 minutes. Perfectly timed. James stayed up late that night, obsessed with the recordings. He insisted something was talking back. He'd adjusted the signal and said he was beginning to hear patterns, rhythms. Not language exactly, but intentional structure. At 2:37 a.m., he told Darren he was going to sit on the bow for a while to listen in peace. He never came back. They searched the boat from stern to bow. No splash, no scream, no signs of struggle. The sea was glassy, no currents, no wind. His shoes were by the railing. His coat hung neatly over a deck chair. It was like he had stepped out of his body. They called the Coast Guard, waited for hours. A helicopter came at dawn, circled left. Nothing. The other three were told to return to port, but they refused. James had been their colleague for nearly a decade. Monique, his girlfriend, was hysterical but adamant. We find him or we don't come back. That night, Kelly noticed the equipment was still picking up the strange noise, but it had changed. It wasn't a pulse anymore. It was a pattern. It was copying James's last radio transmission, static-laced word for word. Then something bumped the boat. Not a wave. A hit. Sharp and fast, like something enormous had nudged it from below. Darren ran to check the sonar. There was nothing. But the hydrophone was screaming, an oscillating shriek, too loud to be natural, louder than anything they'd recorded before. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Not even the typical ocean noise. No whales, no shrimp, no thermal vents, nothing. Like the ocean itself had gone mute. At 3:12 a.m., Monique began sleepwalking. They found her on the stern ladder, halfway into the water. Her eyes were open, but unseeing. Her lips were moving. Kelly pulled her back just in time, but Monique fought. She was murmuring something, low and guttural, like a chant in a language no one recognized. Then she screamed, not a scream of fear, but of anger. She said he was calling. She said James was alive down there and they had to go. They locked her in the cabin. She slammed her head against the walls for hours. Then she went still. She didn't speak again for 2 days, just stared at the water. When Kelly asked her what happened, Monique said only, "It saw me." Darren wanted to leave. He started prepping the boat for departure. But when he tried to raise the anchor, it wouldn't budge. Not because it was stuck, because the chain was gone. Cut clean. Something had taken it. Then the generator died. No power, no radio, no lights. The GPS blinked and went black. And the sonar, it came back on by itself and showed only one thing, a mass, a slow-moving shape rising from below, bigger than a submarine, bigger than a blue whale. No identifiable structure. Just black, like a void in the shape of a creature. Kelly panicked. He grabbed a flare gun and shot it into the air. It fizzled out far too fast, swallowed by a fog that hadn't been there minutes before. Fog that now surrounded the boat in all directions. That night, they tried to stay together in the cabin, but the sound returned. Not through the equipment, through the water itself. A deep, rhythmic knock, like a heartbeat, echoing through the hull. And with it something else, a voice. Not one they could understand, but it was in their minds. Whispering, bleeding into their dreams, promising things. Kelly dreamt of drowning in ink, unable to scream as something pulled him deeper. Darren dreamt of James, standing on the seafloor, smiling, his eyes pure black, mouthing words that sounded like pressure and bone. Monique just stared at the walls, tears streaming, whispering, "He's in the trench. He's becoming." At dawn, Kelly was gone. No splash, no noise, just gone. His bunk was empty, sheets soaked with salt water, his journal open to a page with one line, "It can reach inside us now." Darren broke. He tried to start the engine manually. As he worked, Monique climbed the railing. Darren ran to stop her, but she turned and smiled. "I hear him," she said. "He sings to me now." She stepped off. Darren watched her vanish beneath the surface without a ripple. No splash. Just gone. He was alone. 3 days passed before a Portuguese research vessel spotted the Thalassa drifting. Darren was curled on the floor of the cabin, dehydrated, unresponsive, eyes wide open. He was taken back to land, placed under psychiatric care. What he said later, before he stopped speaking entirely, was this: "It's not a creature. Not exactly. It's a space. A mind. A thing that's older than the ocean. It waits down there beneath where light can go. It doesn't swim. It dreams. And when you enter its dreams, you belong to it. It doesn't take your body. It takes you." When asked about the recordings, the equipment was checked. All of it was fried, memory wiped clean as if it had never been used. But the flare gun? One flare missing. The sonar paper? Burnt black, as if scorched from the inside. The Thalassa was impounded. Later, it vanished from the naval yard during a storm. No signs of forced entry. It just disappeared. No one talks about it now. Not officially. But oceanographers trade stories. and this one keeps coming back. Divers off Guam heard a voice through their oxygen masks, one that didn't belong to anyone on the radio. A submarine crew in the South Pacific reported a shape that followed them for 26 hours. A shape that never pinged sonar. One crew member went mad, clawed at his own ears, said the sea was whispering secrets too loud to ignore. And off the coast of Chile, a fishing vessel pulled up an empty net. Inside was a single object, a human molar, perfectly clean, untouched by fish or rot. But when they tested the DNA, it didn't match any known human. There are trenches in the ocean we've never reached, places where light dies and pressure crushes steel, and something is down there. It doesn't care about our science. It doesn't need to feed. It just waits, sleeps, dreams, and when you get too close, it dreams of you. So if you're ever on the water and the sea goes quiet, completely silent, don't listen too hard. Don't stare too long into the blue-black. And if you hear knocking on your hull in the middle of the night, don't answer. Some things were never meant to be found.
Story number 3.
In the summer of 2016, 4 friends, Eric, Lacey, Mark, and Jules, set off on a cross-country road trip from Oregon to Virginia. It was the kind of trip people dream about. Back roads, no real schedule, just open highway and time to kill. They took Eric's grandfather's old but reliable van, loaded it with supplies, and headed out with the kind of enthusiasm only people in their 20s can muster. They planned to camp where they could, crash in cheap motels when they had to, and soak up the weirdness of America along the way. They made it halfway across the country without anything strange happening. Quirky roadside attractions, one very sketchy gas station in Wyoming, a thunderstorm outside Kansas City, but nothing they hadn't expected. The real story didn't start until they hit a stretch of back highway in Tennessee, somewhere south of Cookeville, where GPS lost its mind and cell service disappeared like a switch had been flipped. They'd been driving for hours. It was past midnight, and they were somewhere between nowhere and nothing. No towns, no traffic, just miles of black road winding through forest. They hadn't seen another car for over an hour when they saw it. A sign made of old wood, nailed to a post, barely legible in the high beams. It said, Red Hollow, 9 miles. Mark joked that it sounded like a horror movie town. Lacey laughed. Jules said they should go just to see if there was an old cemetery or something spooky. Eric, who was driving, shrugged and took the turn. The road narrowed immediately, trees arching overhead, casting shadows that bent and moved in the headlights. After about 10 minutes, they reached a clearing with a single gas station, a general store that looked abandoned, and a narrow dirt road that led deeper into the woods. There were no people, no animals, not even bugs. The gas station had one old, rusty pump. The sign above the store said Warren's General in faded paint. Eric pulled in, mostly because they were low on gas and he didn't want to risk driving farther. The pump had no card reader, just a note taped to it that read, "Pay inside." He went in alone. The bell over the door jingled, and he said the smell hit him instantly. Old wood, mildew, and something metallic, like rust or blood. The store was dimly lit by a flickering fluorescent light. There was a counter, a few shelves, and an old man standing behind the register, motionless like he'd been waiting. Eric told him they needed gas. The man didn't speak, just nodded once and pressed something under the counter. Eric heard the pump click outside. He left cash on the counter and backed out. When he returned to the van, the others were staring into the woods. Lacey pointed to something just past the tree line. "I swear someone's watching us," she said. Eric looked but saw nothing, just black trees and deeper black beyond. They pumped gas fast and drove on. Past the store, the dirt road continued, and curiosity got the better of them. Red Hollow had to be close. The road got worse, narrower, rougher, overgrown in places. The trees got denser. Then they saw it, a sign made of stone, half buried in weeds. "Welcome to Red Hollow, Est 1883. Beyond it, a small town materialized out of the dark. One street, maybe 20 buildings, houses with peeling paint, a church with a broken steeple, and what looked like a shuttered school. There were no lights, no cars, no movement. Jules, always the brave one, wanted to get out and look around. "It's like a ghost town," she said. "Come on, it'll be cool." Against Eric's better judgment, they parked by the church and stepped out into the silence. It was unnatural. No wind, no crickets. Not even the sound of their own footsteps on the cracked pavement echoed the way it should have. They split up. Mark and Lacey went to check out the church while Eric and Jules wandered toward the school. The doors were all unlocked, swinging easily, like they hadn't been shut in years. But the interiors were weirdly clean. Dusty, sure, but not decayed. Desks still arranged in rows, hymnals still on pews. It felt wrong. Then the air changed. Eric said it was like walking into a freezer. The temperature dropped instantly. He and Jules were inside the school when it happened, down the hall when they heard a locker slam behind them. They turned, expecting Mark or Lacey, but no one was there. Then they heard the bell ring, not loud, but soft, distant, as if it were ringing from underground. Jules grabbed his arm. "Did you hear that?" He nodded. They backed out of the building. Across the street, Lacey came running from the church, screaming for them to get in the van. She looked terrified. Mark wasn't with her. They piled into the van. Lacey was hyperventilating. She kept saying, "We have to go. Now. Now. We shouldn't be here." Eric peeled out of Red Hollow, dirt spraying behind them. Once they'd put a few miles between them and the town, they stopped. Lacey finally spoke, shaking, still pale. She said she and Mark were in the church. He'd gone up to the altar and she was looking through hymnals when the organ started playing on its own. Just a single note, held too long. Then a second. It was a tune, slow and disjointed, like a song trying to remember itself. Mark turned around and smiled, but something was wrong with his eyes. She said they were completely black, not just pupils, everything. He reached out to her and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm almost finished." She ran, didn't look back. Mark never came out. They went back the next day with police. The town wasn't there. The road was overgrown, impassable. No sign of a gas station, no general store, just woods, endless woods. They searched for hours, nothing. The sheriff said they must have taken a wrong turn. Probably dreamed most of it, but they hadn't. Eric had the receipt from the gas station in his wallet. It read Warren's General with a timestamp, 3:17 a.m., but it was dated July 3rd, 1964. He showed it to a historian later. The man said Warren's General had burned down in 1971. Red Hollow had been abandoned decades earlier after a series of strange disappearances. Rumor was the town worshipped something old, not Christian, something they buried in the woods every harvest. Every few years, people said they saw lights down there, heard music, went missing. Jules had nightmares for months. In one, she saw Mark again, standing in the school hallway. Behind him, shadowy figures, tall, thin, no faces. He opened his mouth and a chorus of children's voices came out, singing something in a language she didn't know. Eric never went on another road trip. Sold the van, got a desk job. He doesn't talk about that night, but sometimes when the weather's bad and the trees outside start swaying just so, he swears he hears a bell. Lacey moved back home, stopped traveling altogether. The last time anyone mentioned Red Hollow, she just said, "It found a way back. It always does." Sometimes, late at night, Jules will wake up to her phone vibrating. No messages, no calls, just a voice whispering from the speaker before it cuts out. We're still here. So if you're ever on a road trip and your GPS cuts out and you find yourself on an empty road with no cell signal and a strange town on the horizon, don't stop. Don't explore. Don't get out of the car. Red Hollow's still waiting.
Story number 4.
In the fall of 2011, I took a job with a regional historical preservation society based out of Asheville, North Carolina. It was the kind of position that sounded more exciting on paper than it really was. Lots of filing, grant writing, sorting through yellowed newspaper clippings. But once in a while, I got to go on site to inspect old properties slated for restoration or demolition. That was the part I lived for. Long forgotten towns, abandoned churches, schoolhouses with desks still nailed to the floors. They felt like ghosts caught in time. That's how I ended up in Coldwater. I'd never heard of it before. Coldwater didn't show up on any current maps, just a mention in a 1932 deed and a few old census records from the late 1800s. According to county property logs, it hadn't been officially incorporated in over 60 years. No zip code, no post office. It was a black hole of data, which, to me, made it fascinating. My boss gave me a dusty manila folder and said a family in Tennessee had submitted a claim for ancestral land in Coldwater. Their great-grandfather had supposedly built a chapel there, and they wanted it preserved as a historic site. I volunteered to go check it out. The only directions were handwritten, referencing old state roads and landmarks that no longer existed. It took me 5 hours of driving, 2 wrong turns, and one almost blown tire before I found the sign, Coldwater, Est 1854. It was nailed to a leaning post, half rotted and obscured by vines. Beyond it, the forest thickened around a cracked 2-lane road that curved downhill into fog. The trees were dense and too tall, like they hadn't been cut back in a century. My cell signal vanished the moment I passed the sign. Coldwater sat in a valley shrouded by trees and time. The town had maybe 24 buildings, most collapsed or leaning, built from heavy stone and blackened wood. The place didn't look abandoned. It looked sealed off. The weirdest thing? The silence. No birds, no wind, not even the hum of insects, just the sound of my own footsteps crunching old gravel. The air felt thick, still. It smelled like wet leaves and rust. I parked by what used to be a general store, its windows broken, shelves inside still stacked with dusty cans. I wandered the town with my camera and notebook, documenting buildings, taking GPS coordinates even though my phone wouldn't track them. Most of the houses were gutted, roofs caved in, but a few looked preserved, like someone had cared for them. Swept porches, unbroken windows. One even had a lit lantern hanging by the door. That should have made me turn around. It didn't. I followed the path up the hill to where the chapel was supposed to be. It was there, all right, tall and narrow, white paint peeled to gray, cross still crooked atop the spire. But unlike everything else in Coldwater, the chapel was pristine, like it had been painted yesterday. Even the brass door handle shone. I stepped inside. It was dark and freezing, despite the warm October sun outside. The pews were arranged in perfect lines. Candles burned at the altar, though I never saw any flame. It smelled like lilies and something older, sour, like preserved meat. On the walls were old paintings, the kind you'd expect in a small-town church, but their eyes had been scratched out, every one of them. Then I noticed something that stopped me cold, a row of children's shoes lined up along the back wall. Dozens of pairs, tiny, worn, and too many to ignore. They were all facing the altar. I backed out and closed the door gently. At that point, I told myself it was probably some private preservation project, maybe a historical society I didn't know about, maybe someone local cared about the place. But the road was crumbling. No mailboxes, no power lines, and no people. I'd been there nearly 3 hours and seen no one. Not a sound, not a movement. Until I got back to my car. Standing next to it was a woman. She was barefoot, wearing a long gray dress that looked handmade. Her skin was pale waxy. Her eyes were wrong, too wide, too still. She didn't speak. I asked if she lived there. No response. I said I was with the Preservation Society and was looking into the chapel. Nothing. Then she turned and pointed down the road. Not the road I came in on, but a side path I hadn't noticed before, half hidden by brush. "Reverend Waits," she said. Her voice was high and flat, like a recording. Before I could respond, she walked off into the trees and disappeared. I should have left. I know that now. But something about her tone, it was like I had to go down that path, like I wasn't allowed to leave until I did. I followed it for maybe 15 minutes before I heard the bell. It wasn't from the chapel. It was deeper in the woods, echoing through the trees like it was coming from underground. The path opened to a clearing where a second chapel stood. This one built from black stone, much older. There were carvings around the door I couldn't read, deep and crude, and the windows were covered from the inside with something that looked like stitched fabric. The door was open. I went inside. There were no pews, no altar, just a massive hole in the center of the stone floor, ringed with candles. The walls were covered in childlike drawings, red stick figures, shapes that looked like antlers, and a creature with too many legs. Beside the hole stood a man in a dark suit. His back was to me, head bowed. He was murmuring something. I stepped forward and called out. He stopped speaking, but didn't turn around. "I'm from the Asheville Historical Society," I said. "Are you the Reverend?" He raised one hand. Slowly, his skin was gray-blue and like old waterlogged flesh. "You shouldn't have come," he said. His voice echoed in a way that didn't fit the space, like there were 10 of him speaking at once. Then he turned around. His eyes were sealed shut, sewn. His mouth, too, was stitched, black thread and wet-looking. But I'd heard him speak. He raised both hands and stepped toward me. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to the car. I don't remember the road out. I only remember vomiting on the side of the highway and driving for hours before I felt normal again. Back at the office, I tried to file my report, but the GPS data was blank. The photos, all corrupted. My notes, which I'd written in longhand, had bled so badly the ink was unreadable. I tried to tell my boss. He thought I was joking. I went back to find Coldwater 2 months later. Nothing was there. The road didn't exist. Just trees and hills. No sign, no ruins. I contacted the family who filed the claim. The number was disconnected. The address didn't exist. I spent the next year looking for someone, anyone, who'd heard of the town. I found one man, a retired mail carrier who said he used to deliver to that area in the 70s. He said there was a Coldwater once, but it ain't right. Told me the town buried its children under the chapel, claimed they'd been taken by the Black Saint. Said the people there were strange, spoke in riddles, didn't take kindly to outsiders. One day, the whole town went silent. No one answered mail. No one came to town. A team went out to check, never came back. He told me one last thing before he shut the door in my face. If you went there and made it back, he said, don't talk about it. Don't remember it. That's how it gets in. I didn't sleep right for months. Nightmares of red drawings and children's shoes, of something whispering from a hole in the ground. I stopped working for the Historical Society, moved to a city, forgot as best I could, until 2 weeks ago. I got a letter, no return address, no stamp, just a piece of paper inside with one sentence, "The Reverend still waits." I burned it. But now at night I hear the bell again. I check the doors 3 times. I don't sleep near windows, because Coldwater may be gone, but it isn't empty, and I think it remembers me.
Story number 5.
I was a cop for nearly 22 years. Most of what you see on TV about the job is dramatized. The paperwork alone can kill your soul faster than the streets ever will. But every so often, something happens, something you never talk about in your report. Because if you do, you know they'll either call you crazy or start asking questions you can't answer. This happened in 2004 in a small town in northern Illinois. I won't name it because I still have friends on the force there, and let's just say there are things we don't like to poke at. I was a night shift patrol officer back then. My partner was Rick, a guy with a sharp sense of humor, steady hands, and 15 years on the job. We knew every corner of that town, every alley, every broken down house the city kept forgetting to tear down. Nothing surprised us. At least that's what we thought. It was just past 2 a.m. when the first call came through. Disturbance reported at 1160 Weller Avenue. Dispatch said the caller was incoherent, just kept saying, "They're here again. They're in the walls." No name, just an address and panic. Weller was a dead-end street that butted up against the old rail yard. All the houses out there were run down, boarded up places that hadn't seen tenants in years. We figured it was probably a squatter on something strong or a prank. Rick and I rolled up to the house around 2:20. The place was dark, windows busted, front door hanging off its hinges. The lawn was knee-high with weeds, and something about the silence out there just felt off. I remember getting this sudden headache the moment I stepped out of the cruiser, like the pressure dropped all at once. We made entry from the front. Flashlights up, standard sweep. The inside was worse than the outside. Floorboards creaked under our boots, and there was graffiti everywhere. Some of it looked fresh, but it wasn't anything I recognized. Not gang tags, just weird symbols, loops, spires, some kind of runes maybe. A smell hit us the second we passed the threshold. Mold and rot and something else I still don't have words for, like wet copper. "Hello, police department," Rick called out. No answer. We moved room, living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms. Empty. But then we heard it, something scratching inside the walls. At first, it sounded like rats. Common enough? Then it got louder, more deliberate, like fingernails dragging slow and deep against plaster. Then a thud. Then 2. Then whatever was in there started knocking back in a rhythm that seemed purposeful. Rick and I exchanged a look. We followed the sound to a door in the back hallway. It led down to the basement. The door was padlocked from the outside. New hardware, shiny compared to the rest of the house. Rick raised his eyebrows. "If this place is abandoned, who the hell's locking basements?" He called it in. Dispatch confirmed the property was supposed to be condemned. No known tenants, no power, no permits pulled. We cut the lock. The basement was pitch black. No windows, just the beam of our flashlights catching dust in the air. It was colder down there, way colder than it should have been for July. The stairs creaked loud under our weight, and with every step, that feeling of wrongness got worse. You learn to trust your gut in this line of work. Mine was screaming at me. At the bottom of the stairs, we found a door to what looked like an old coal room. The sound was louder now, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. But there was no one down there. The room was small and bare except for a single chair in the corner facing the wall and a small cloth bundle sitting right in front of it. Rick covered while I stepped closer to check it out. The bundle was a doll, hand-sewn, button eyes, mouth stitched shut. It was filthy, but there were symbols carved into the fabric in places, same as the ones we saw upstairs. I picked it up and heard something behind me, a shuffle, then what sounded like a giggle. Rick spun toward it, but his light caught nothing. Then the wall in front of the chair cracked open. It didn't fall or break. It just cracked. A long, jagged line split down the center of the wall, and something behind it started to move. We both backed away, weapons drawn. I swear to you, on my badge, on my life, something stepped out. It looked human. At least it had the shape of one. But it was wrong. Too thin, too tall. Its skin looked like stretched paper, and its face was smooth, no eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just flat flesh, like clay that hadn't been sculpted yet. It didn't walk. It slid forward, fast and silent. Rick yelled for it to stop. It didn't. He fired 2 rounds. I followed with 1. No blood. No reaction. The thing jerked from the hits but didn't fall. It just stopped and tilted its head like a confused dog. Then it screamed. No mouth, no lungs, but somehow it screamed. A sound like a woman's voice mixed with static and metal grinding on metal. I dropped the doll. It burned cold in my hands as it hit the floor. The thing lunged at Rick. I tackled it from the side, but it passed through me, cold as ice, like I'd just been dunked underwater. I hit the ground hard. Rick was gone. Just gone. I scrambled back up and pointed my light around. Nothing. Just empty walls. The cracked seam was sealed. No sign of Rick. I called for backup. No answer. My radio was nothing but static. I got out of that house. I don't remember running up the stairs or leaving the building. I just remember falling against the hood of the cruiser, throwing up, and trying to breathe. Backup finally arrived 20 minutes later. When they went inside, the house was clean. No symbols, no basement chair, no doll, no signs of gunfire, no blood. Rick was listed as missing in action. They did an internal investigation. I was put on medical leave, psychological review. I told the truth, but after a few sessions, I stopped. You can only take so many polite nods and coping mechanism lectures before you realize no one's going to believe you. 6 months later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was the doll, same buttons, same stitches, and the words "he's not done" written in childlike handwriting on the back of a yellowing photograph. The photo showed Rick, only it wasn't Rick as I knew him. He looked older, thinner, eyes hollow, standing next to someone who looked just like the thing we saw. Same height, same blank face, like it had grown skin over time. I tried tracing the package. Got nowhere. Postal Service had no record of it being sent. Over the next few years, I heard whispers from other officers. People who'd worked weird cases they didn't like to talk about. People who'd seen things in old buildings, on empty roads, out in the woods. One guy told me about a girl they found in a locked basement. She was 9 years old but had no memory, no name. Her teeth were filed flat. She wouldn't speak, just drew spirals on the walls. Every once in a while, someone asks me why I left the force. I tell them I'd seen too much death, too many overdoses, shootings, domestic calls gone bad. But the real reason? Because every now and then I get a letter. Always unmarked, always handwritten. And every time it's just one sentence: "We're not finished with you yet." If you ever ride along with a cop on the night shift and you see them hesitate before responding to an abandoned house or an empty building with a single flickering light inside, remember this. There are some calls we take not because we want to, but because something wants us to. And some of us never come back.
Story number 6.
In 2015, I worked as a traveling auditor for a boutique hotel chain based in the Midwest. My job was to drop in unannounced at different properties to inspect financials, guest records, and security protocols. Most of the time, I checked into hotels under a fake name, stayed 1 or 2 nights, and quietly observed how staff operated when they thought no one was watching. It was lonely work. Nights spent alone in rooms designed for temporary comfort, waking up in different cities week after week. But I liked the anonymity. That fall, I was sent to inspect a location the company had recently purchased outside of Elizabethtown, Kentucky. The hotel wasn't a chain. It was a historic property they'd acquired to renovate with charm, as the brochure said. It had once been the old Ashmore Hotel, built in 1903, 3 stories tall with a red brick facade, wrought iron balconies, and vines crawling up the walls. The kind of place that felt heavy with time. I arrived just after dusk. The parking lot was empty, except for one other car, a dusty sedan that looked abandoned. The front doors were glass, but tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. When I stepped through them, I was hit by 2 things at once, a wave of cold air and the smell of mildew and something faintly metallic, blood-like. The lobby was empty. No music, no front desk clerk, just dim chandeliers hanging low and a grandfather clock ticking in the corner, even though its hands didn't move. I rang the bell on the counter. No response, just the soft creak of old wood settling. After a few minutes, a man appeared from a side door. He was tall, pale, dressed in an outdated maroon bellhop uniform. No name tag, no smile, just eyes too wide and still. "Checking in?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "under the name Delaney." He nodded without looking at a computer, pulled a key from a drawer and handed it to me. Room 305. No explanation, no ID check, just the key, a real metal one, heavy and cold, and a gesture toward the elevator. I wanted to ask more, but something about the way he stared at me, like he already knew who I was and why I was there, made me keep my mouth shut. The elevator was old-fashioned, with a sliding metal grate. I had to pull it shut myself. It groaned as it rose. The ride was slow, and the hallway it opened into was darker than it should have been. The wallpaper was peeling, the carpet worn down to the threads. The lights flickered in a rhythm that felt too regular to be random. Room 305 was at the end of the hall. I unlocked it and stepped in. It was clean, mostly. Bed made, curtains drawn. But the air inside felt wrong, stale and sour. The kind of stillness that told you no one had opened a window in decades. I flicked on the lamp beside the bed. It buzzed, then cast a dull orange light. I checked the room for the usual smoke detectors, hidden cameras, power outlets. Everything looked normal. But as I turned down the bed, I noticed something tucked under the pillow, a small, black and white photo. It showed a woman, maybe mid-30s, standing at the window of what looked like the same room. Her face was blurred, almost smudged out, as if someone had dragged their thumb across the photo before it dried. Written on the back, in neat cursive, "She never left." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My first thought was, prank. Staff sometimes played games when they caught wind of an inspector coming. But no one should have known I was here. That night I couldn't sleep. At around 2:17 a.m., exactly, I remember checking the clock, I heard someone in the hallway. Slow footsteps, not heavy, but deliberate, like bare feet on carpet. I sat up and listened. The steps stopped just outside my door, then a soft knock. 3 taps. I didn't move. Another knock. I called out, "Who is it?" No answer. I got up, looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the carpet outside the door was wet. 3 footprints. Bare. Leading away. I locked the deadbolt, checked the windows. Couldn't sleep after that. Just laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. In the morning, I went down to the front desk. A woman was there now, middle-aged, heavy-set, with tired eyes. "Rough night?" she asked, almost like she already knew. I nodded slowly. "This place, it have any history I should know about?" She didn't answer at first, just looked over my shoulder like she was checking if anyone was behind me. "The Ashmore used to be a hospital," she said. "During the Spanish flu, they used the top floor for quarantine. People died in their rooms, lots of them." "Room 305, I asked. She hesitated. "They say a nurse hanged herself in that room. Got infected, wasn't allowed to leave. She went mad. Guests say they hear her crying at night, tapping on the walls." I asked if there were any reports, any official documentation. "Not that we'd show guests," she said. "But between you and me, we don't put people in that room anymore. Only reason you got it was because the night guy doesn't know any better." That was enough for me. I had what I needed. I spent the rest of the day doing my inspection. Everything was as expected. Records incomplete, some safety violations, guest logs that hadn't been updated in weeks. I took notes, snapped photos, and planned to leave the next morning. That night, I requested a different room. They gave me 204. At midnight, the fire alarm in my room went off. shrill and sudden. I checked the hallway. No smoke. No other alarms. I called the front desk. No answer. I went down to the lobby myself. Empty. Not just the desk, the entire first floor. All the lights were off. The chandeliers swayed gently, though there was no breeze. The grandfather clock was gone. I turned to go back to my room and saw someone at the top of the stairs. A woman, standing still, wearing a nurse's uniform, faded white with a red cross. Her face was wrong, twisted, lips stretched too wide, eyes completely black. She didn't move. I blinked. She was gone. I left the hotel that night, packed my bag, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. Drove 2 hours to the nearest major city and got a room at a La Quinta. I wrote my report, filed it, kept out the parts no one would believe. But it didn't end there. 3 weeks later, I got a call from HR. Said the night clerk at the Ashmore, the same guy who checked me in, had gone missing. Last seen entering the building, never left. Security footage showed him standing in the hallway outside room 305 at 2:17 a.m., just staring at the door. Then the footage cuts to static. When it resumes, he's gone. I tried to forget it. Told myself it was just stress, exhaustion. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Until a package arrived at my home. No return address. Inside was a single photo. Same woman as before. Only this time her face wasn't smudged. It was my face.
Story number 7.
In the summer of 2012, I went on what was supposed to be a soul-cleansing camping trip with 3 friends from college. We were all in our late 20s, burnt out from jobs, breakups, and city life, and we wanted something raw, something untouched by Wi-Fi, car horns, and late-night emails. Jamie was the planner. She found a spot in the Adirondacks, well off the popular trails, through a blog written by some guy who mapped forgotten campsites from the 70s and 80s. It was marked only as Site 47, and supposedly hadn't been used in over 20 years. No photos, no maps beyond a set of hand-sketched directions. We thought it was perfect. It took us nearly 5 hours to hike in. The trail wasn't a trail at all, just faded tree markings and a rusted-out sign, barely visible, under moss. We crossed a shallow creek, climbed a ridge, and found the clearing just before sunset. It was eerie how still it felt. No birds, no bugs, just wind threading through the trees. But we were exhausted and exhilarated. We set up 2 tents, started a small fire, and cooked canned chili while trading stories under the glow of our headlamps. That first night was uneventful. The silence was thick, but we chalked it up to being so far off-grid, the kind of peace we'd been craving. Around midnight, we all turned in. Sometime in the early hours, I woke up to a sound, a soft rustling like leaves brushing against nylon. I assumed it was Jamie going to pee or maybe a raccoon, so I rolled over. But the noise got louder, closer, then stopped. And then I heard breathing. Heavy, slow, right outside my tent wall, my body locked up. I didn't move, didn't speak. The breathing continued for maybe 30 seconds, maybe more. And then there was the softest tap, like someone laid a single fingertip against the canvas. Then it was gone. No footsteps. Just silence. I barely slept. In the morning, I asked if anyone had been out of their tent. No one had. Jamie laughed it off. You probably dreamed it. This place gets in your head. I wanted to believe that. I really did. We spent the day hiking deeper into the woods, trying to find a rumored lake marked on the blogger's hand-drawn map. We didn't find it, but we did stumble onto something else, an old fire ring. Stones blackened with ash, long since cold, but around it were scraps of a decayed tarp, glass bottles, and a rusted hunting knife stuck blade first into the dirt. Not ancient, but not recent either. Maybe 5-10 years old. There was a smell, too. Faint, sweet and sour, like something spoiled. Jamie wanted to keep exploring. I didn't. Something about that site felt wrong. Eventually we turned back, tension trailing behind us like smoke. That night, we didn't make a fire. We were too tired. We sat around a battery-powered lantern, eating protein bars and half-heartedly joking about the Blair Witch. But the mood was different. Everyone kept glancing into the trees, listening. At some point, Aaron mentioned how weird the woods were. No birds, no crickets. It's like something's watching us. Jamie brushed it off, but I could see her forcing her smile. We went to bed early. That night, I woke up again. This time it wasn't rustling, it was humming. A low, tuneless hum, just outside. I sat up slowly, heart hammering, and leaned toward the tent flap. I didn't unzip it, I just listened. The humming moved from one side of the tent to the other. Then it stopped. Then came a whisper. Not words. Just Syllables. Gibberish, soft and fast like someone talking to themselves. I froze. Then something scraped against the tent, a long, dragging stroke, like a nail. Then another. And then silence. I stayed awake until the sky turned pale. In the morning, I found 3 long marks scratched into the dirt outside my tent. Parallel, uneven, like fingers. When I showed the others, they got quiet. Jamie looked at the marks and then at the trees. "There's no way that's an animal," she said. "Not like that." That day, we argued. I wanted to pack up and leave. So did Aaron. But Jamie and Claire insisted we'd come this far, that it was just wilderness paranoia. They laughed a little too loudly, like trying to scare the fear away. But as the sun set, it felt like the woods were leaning in. The shadows came quicker. The wind didn't blow, it whispered. We lit the fire that night, big and bright. We sat close. No one said it, but we all felt it. Whatever was out there was getting closer. Around midnight, Claire screamed. We all jumped. She pointed into the dark. There was someone, standing right there, I swear. We shone flashlights into the trees. Nothing. Just blackness. Claire started crying. He was tall, no shirt, just staring at me. We wanted to believe she imagined it. We needed to. Jamie slept with a knife. Aaron stayed up, gripping a branch like a bat. I barely blinked. At 3:12 a.m., I remember because I checked my watch, I saw a figure, just beyond the tree line. Still, silent, pale. It moved when I looked at it, not walking, just shifting, like flickering between positions. I called out, no response. When I aimed my flashlight at it, there was nothing there. But a second later, a soft tap hit my tent wall again, and I heard the whispering. Only this time, I understood one word. Closer. At dawn, we packed everything. No argument, no discussion, just panic deficiency. We hiked fast, too fast. Claire twisted her ankle crossing the ridge, and we had to half carry her. As we passed the creek, we noticed something horrifying. The rocks had been rearranged into a spiral, perfectly shaped, fresh. We hadn't done that. And then we saw the trees. Carved into several of them were those same long scratches, deep, deliberate, always 3, always angled downward. We didn't stop to take pictures. We just ran. We made it back to the car by late afternoon, sweaty, bleeding, breathless. We drove without speaking for hours until we hit a gas station with cell service. I checked the blog later that week. Site 47 was gone. No mention of it. Like it had never existed. I emailed the blogger. No response. A few weeks later, the entire blog vanished. We tried to talk about it over the years, tried to rationalize it. Old hermit, Jamie once said, just some backwoods guy messing with us. But none of us really believed that. 2 years later, Claire died. Suicide. Pills. In her note she wrote, "He still stands at the edge of my dreams." Humming. I haven't been camping since. Sometimes when I sleep with the window open, I swear I hear it again. That low, tuneless hum. And I wake to find dirt under my fingernails, though I haven't touched the ground in days.
Story number 8.
In the fall of 2009, I was long-hauling freight across the Midwest, mostly night shifts. I'd been on the road for over 10 years, hauling everything from livestock to industrial hardware. There are things you see on the road that don't make sense. Ghost towns with fresh tire tracks, lights that follow you in the rear view and vanish when you stop, people walking alone at 3 a.m. where there's no exit for 30 miles. But nothing ever stuck with me like what happened on Route 54, just outside of Cairo, Illinois. It was a Wednesday night. I had a load of auto parts to deliver to a distribution center in Memphis. My CB radio was quiet, save for occasional weather reports. I'd been driving for 8 hours straight and figured I'd stop at the next truck pull-off to stretch my legs and take a leak. Route 54 isn't heavily traveled at night, especially not the stretch that runs between old cornfields and thick woods. It was colder than usual, and fog had started rolling in around mile marker 81. Around mile 84, I noticed a flickering light ahead. A gas station, maybe? But as I got closer, I realized it was an old rest stop, one of those single-bay pull-offs with a couple of picnic tables, a cracked vending machine, and an outhouse that smelled like regret. The light came from an old mercury vapor lamp, barely clinging to life, buzzing like it had something to say. I parked my rig and stepped out. The fog had thickened, curling around the trees like smoke. Everything was quiet except for the distant chirp of crickets and that buzzing light. I walked to the outhouse, did my business, and started back to the truck. That's when I saw him. Standing about 10 feet from my cab was a man, pale, tall. wearing a tattered brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there like he'd been waiting for me. "Need a lift?" I asked, trying to play it cool. He didn't answer. I took a step closer. That's when I saw his face, or what was left of it. The lower half looked melted, like candle wax, teeth and bone poking through slick flesh. His lips moved, but no sound came out, just silence. I bolted back to the cab, climbed in, locked the door, and fired up the engine. My headlights hit him square on, and he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I just drove. Kept the radio on, volume up. I didn't stop again until I hit Tennessee. 2 days later, I mentioned it at a trucker diner outside of Nashville. Figured maybe someone else had seen the guy. One of the old-timers sitting at the counter turned toward me real slow. "You seen the Hat Man," he said. "Don't mess with the Hat Man." I laughed, thinking it was just a ghost story. "You think I'm joking, but I'm not," he said. "We've been seeing him since the 70s, always near Route 54, always alone, always silent. Sometimes he shows up in your mirror, sometimes standing by your truck when you wake up. But he only shows up to the ones that have it coming." "Have what coming?" I asked. The old man didn't answer, just sipped his coffee and stared out the window. Over the next few weeks, I tried to forget about it. But strange things started happening. First, my GPS began glitching. Always around 2:17 a.m. The screen would go black, then flicker back on, showing me as off-road, deep in some forest that didn't exist. Then came the noises. Whispers in my sleeper cabin. Static on the CB, even when no one else was broadcasting. One night I heard scratching from the inside of the trailer, even though it was empty. I took it in for service. They found nothing. One night, heading through southern Missouri, I pulled off for a mandatory break, parked in a well-lit truck stop right under a security camera. I closed the curtains and lay down. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of something climbing up the side of the cab. Not footsteps, clawing. I grabbed my flashlight and threw open the curtain. Nothing was there. But on the driver's side mirror, there was a handprint. Not human. Too long. Fingers too thin, smudged like it had been dragged down slowly. I was done. I took 2 weeks off and went home. Didn't tell my wife the whole story, just said I was tired. Burnt out. I was hoping the distance would help, but even at home, I couldn't escape it. I'd wake up with dirt under my nails, smell exhaust in the bedroom. One night, I woke to find my truck keys lying on my chest, even though I kept them on a hook in the garage. I started dreaming of Route 54. Always the same. Fog, trees, the rest stop, and the Hat Man standing at the edge of the light. And then the dream changed. He started walking toward me. I went back to work eventually, but I avoided Route 54 like it was radioactive. Even took routes that added 4 or 5 hours to my drive. The other guys at the depot teased me, but I didn't care. I knew what I'd seen. But you can only avoid fate for so long. In December, dispatch gave me a last-minute reroute. A snowstorm had closed down I-55, and they needed someone to take a load down through Cairo and onto Route 54. I told them no, flat out refused. They told me I'd lose the route and probably my job. I caved. It was late. Snow falling in slow, thick flakes. Visibility was garbage and the GPS was jittery. About 40 miles in, I saw the rest stop. I swear to you, I wasn't trying to stop. I wanted to keep going. But the truck, it started slowing down on its own. I pressed the gas. Nothing. I tried the brakes, soft as butter. The cab coasted to a stop right in front of the same mercury vapor lamp. I sat there, shaking. The snow was falling heavier now. I could barely see the trees. Then I saw the figure. He was back, standing in the same spot. Only this time he raised his hand and pointed. Not at me. At the trailer. I got out, heart in my throat, and walked around to the back. There were scratches on the trailer door, deep gouges, like something had been trying to claw its way out. I unlocked it slowly and opened the doors. It was empty, just steel walls and my own echo. Then something whispered behind me, "You brought it." I spun around. No one. I ran back to the cab, slammed the door, and took off. The engine responded this time, like it had been waiting. I didn't stop until I crossed the Mississippi, and I haven't been back since. They say the Hat Man is a warning, a marker, that if you see him once, you're lucky. Twice, and you've got time. 3 times. I saw him again last year, not on the road, in the mirror at home while I was brushing my teeth. Standing behind me, I turned. Nothing there. but the toothbrush in my hand was bent, twisted like something had gripped it with inhuman strength. Now, every night, I keep my truck keys on the pillow beside me. I don't know why. Maybe I think it'll help me know if he comes again. Or maybe I know I won't have time. Because sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still hear him. The humming of a long-dead CB channel, the sound of boots on gravel, and whispers in the dark.
Story number 9.
I used to work as a night shift nurse in a small-town hospital in northern Pennsylvania. We weren't high volume, maybe 20 beds on our med-surg floor, 5 in the ER, 3 in the ICU. It was quiet more often than not, and for most of the years I worked there, that was a blessing. But quiet doesn't always mean peaceful. Some nights it felt like something watched us. I don't mean in a paranoid sense either. I mean you'd be walking down the hall, and the hair on your arms would rise like a storm was coming, only the air was dead still. Nurses swapped stories all the time. Lights flickering, call bells going off from empty rooms, patients talking to people who weren't there. I brushed most of it off. Stress, sleep deprivation, too much caffeine. It wasn't until the winter of 2015 that I learned otherwise. It started with room 209. That room had always been strange. No windows, right across from the storage closet at the end of the west wing. Patients assigned to 209 often asked to be moved. They complained of cold air, of strange dreams, of whispers at night. One even said a woman in a hospital gown stood in the corner and screamed, but no one else ever saw her. Management chalked it up to delirium. We all did. Then came the Hendricks case. Mr. Thomas Hendricks was a retired school teacher, 68, diabetic. He came in with pneumonia and was placed in 209 because it was the only private room left. He was pleasant, soft-spoken, and alert. I was his nurse the first night. Around 2 a.m. I was charting at the nurse's station when his call bell went off. I walked in and he was sitting straight up, trembling. "She was here," he said. I asked who. "The woman. She came from the closet. She was watching me sleep." I turned on all the lights. The room was empty. The closet door was open. Nothing but blankets and extra gowns. I calmed him down, gave him something mild to help him sleep, and wrote it off as a fever dream. But at 3:14 a.m., the monitor at the station let out a sharp, flatline tone. His heart had stopped. I ran to the room. He was cold, blue, no pulse, no breathing. I called a code, and we worked on him for 20 minutes. No success. We documented everything and moved his body to the morgue downstairs. Here's where it starts to really spiral. The next night, room 209 was empty. I was working again, and around 3 a.m., I passed the room. The door was slightly ajar, and the lights were on. That was odd. Housekeeping always turned off unused room lights. I stepped inside to shut them off and instantly felt like I'd walked into a freezer. I could see my breath. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. As I reached for the light switch, I heard it. Breathing. Behind me. I spun around. The room was empty. The closet door creaked open. I didn't wait. I left the light on and walked straight out. When I got back to the station, the monitor displayed something impossible. It was receiving vitals from room 209. Heart rate, 42 BPM. Blood pressure, 82/40. O2 sat 90%. But the room was empty. No patient. No equipment. I called maintenance and IT. They checked the connections, the servers. Nothing was wrong. But the vitals remained for nearly 4 hours. Then they stopped. Everything went dark. Later, I looked at the timestamp. The vitals started at exactly 3:14 a.m., the same time Mr. Hendricks had died. The following week, I avoided 209 as much as I could. Nurses joked about it, called it the cold room. One of the new grads dared someone to spend a break in there with the lights off. A CNA actually did it. She didn't make it 10 minutes. She came back pale as snow, shaking, and refused to go near that wing for the rest of the month. She said someone had whispered her name over and over right next to her ear. We kept rotating patients in and out of 209 because protocol demanded we use available rooms. But something kept happening, and only in that room. Mrs. Langston, a stroke patient, pulled out her IV, screaming about bugs crawling under her skin and a woman in white standing on her chest. A young man admitted for gallbladder surgery was found in the bathroom, curled up and crying. He said the woman in the closet kept asking him to follow her into the wall. All of them described the same thing: a pale woman, long dark hair, thin hospital gown, no eyes. I finally asked an older nurse, Ellie, who'd been working there since the 80s, if she knew anything about the room. Her face went white. She looked over her shoulder before speaking. "That used to be room 217, she said, "before the fire." "What fire?" I asked. She hesitated. "There was a psych ward here 30 years ago. We don't talk about it much. They used to keep patients in that part of the wing." One night, a patient named Alice Burnham lit herself on fire inside the closet. She had doused herself in rubbing alcohol, smuggled in a lighter from another patient. Jesus. They said she'd been hearing voices for weeks, claimed something lived in the walls, screamed every night that it was trying to crawl inside her. I asked why no one ever said anything, why we kept using the room. Ellie shook her head. "Management says it's all superstition, and they don't like people digging up old liability cases." I thought about quitting, transferring, but I didn't. I don't know why. Pride, maybe, a morbid curiosity. I started looking into the fire. There was no record in the hospital archives, but a small-town library newspaper article from 1983 mentioned it. "Local woman dies in isolation room blaze. Foul play suspected." Foul play, not suicide. I made copies of everything and kept them in my locker. Every night, I checked 209. One night in January, we admitted a 9-year-old boy named Matthew with severe pneumonia. His mother begged for a private room. The only one available? 209. I tried to refuse. My supervisor overrode me. That night, I stayed near his room as much as possible. Every time I passed, he was asleep, peaceful. But around 2:45 a.m., the monitors began to spike. Elevated heart rate, shallow breaths. I rushed in. He was sitting up, eyes wide. "She's here," he whispered. "She wants me to play." "Who?" He pointed to the closet. "Alice." That was the first time a patient had said her name. I checked the closet. Nothing. But when I looked back at the bed, Matthew was gone. The covers were folded like he'd never been there. The monitor was blank. I screamed, hit the code button, and within seconds, half the unit was in the room. Only then did we find him, in the closet, unconscious, curled up in the fetal position. We rushed him to ICU. He recovered the next day, but didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, all he said was, "She has no eyes. She lives in the cold." After that, room 209 was decommissioned. Officially, they said it had faulty wiring and structural damage. Unofficially, everyone knew it was Alice. Even now, years later, I have dreams. I'm walking the West Wing. The lights flicker. The monitors beep without cause. I feel something breathing behind me, and I wake up, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. Sometimes I dream I'm inside the closet, and she's outside, waiting. One morning, long after I'd transferred to another hospital, I visited a friend still working there. We had coffee, caught up. I asked about room 209. They said it was sealed off, nothing inside, just a storage space now. But a new nurse claimed her supply cart was moved overnight, found in front of the old door, like something had wheeled it there, and on the closet door, 3 scratch marks like fingernails, and a single whisper captured on the security audio. "I never left."
Story number 10.
I used to work night shifts at a gas station off I-80, just past the Pennsylvania border. It was one of those rundown 24-hour convenience stops with flickering overhead lights, a bathroom that never really got clean, and a constant low hum from the refrigeration units that made you feel like you were never alone. People passed through at all hours. Truckers, road trippers, the occasional college kid heading home too late. You'd see the weirdest mix of people at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world was sleeping. I worked there for just over a year. I thought it would be temporary, something to hold me over until I found something better. I never imagined it would leave me with memories I still can't shake, memories that creep into my dreams and leave me sitting bolt upright in the middle of the night, sweating, heart racing, staring at the corners of my room to make sure nothing's waiting there in the dark. It started one night in early October. The air had that sharp, dry bite it gets when the season's turning, and the roads had been unusually quiet. I was working alone, as usual. My coworker had quit the week before, and management hadn't filled the position yet. Not that it mattered. Between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., we barely got any customers. I kept myself busy by restocking shelves, sweeping, and reading from the same battered paperback I kept stashed under the counter. Around 2:17 a.m., the station's automatic door opened with its usual beep. I looked up from the register, expecting to see someone needing gas or coffee. Instead, I saw a man standing in the doorway. Just standing, not moving. His silhouette was completely still, like he'd frozen mid-step. The outside light flickered behind him, so I couldn't make out his features clearly, but something about him felt off. He was too tall. His clothes didn't match, like he was wearing a winter coat over hospital scrubs and what looked like hiking boots on his feet. I remember this wave of unease rolling over me, like my body sensed something before my mind caught up. Need something? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. No response. He didn't move. I took a step out from behind the counter, and as I did, he turned and walked out. Just turned on his heel and walked away into the dark, heading across the empty lot and toward the woods on the far side. We weren't near any hiking trails or facilities. There was nothing but forest for miles in that direction. Weird, sure, but not terrifying. Not yet. 2 nights later, it happened again. Same time. 2:17 a.m., same man. Only this time, he came all the way inside. He walked slowly down the snack aisle, dragging one hand along the shelves as he passed. I could hear his fingernails tapping the bags of chips. He made no sound otherwise. Just that dragging hand and his footsteps on the tile. Then he turned and stared directly at me. His face was pale, eyes too wide, like he was trying too hard to look human. His lips moved slightly, as if whispering something, but I couldn't hear a sound. "Sir, you okay?" Still no response. He walked up to the counter and placed a single grimy dollar bill on the counter. Then he picked up a roll of mints and walked out without waiting for change. I watched him cross the parking lot again, straight into the woods. This time, I locked the door behind him. I reviewed the security footage the next morning, but the man didn't appear on the tape. I played it back 3 times. At 2:17 a.m., the door beeped. The interior camera showed the door opening and the wind picking up some receipt paper from the floor. But there was no one there. I showed the footage to my manager, who said it was probably a glitch. The timestamp's off. Wind caught the door sensor, no big deal. But I knew what I saw, and that was just the beginning. Over the next week, things escalated. Lights would flicker violently at the same time each night, always just after 2 a.m. Sometimes the slushy machine would start running by itself, whirring and sputtering, though no one touched it. Once I found the bathroom door locked from the inside. I banged on it, thinking someone had snuck in, but when I finally got the maintenance key and opened it, the light was on, and the mirror was fogged up, as if someone had been breathing in there. But no one was inside. Then came the scratching. At first, I thought it was rats in the walls. Old building, rural location. It made sense, but it wasn't in the walls. It was under the floor. I'd be standing at the register, and I'd hear slow, deliberate scratching beneath my feet, as if someone or something was dragging fingernails along the concrete from underneath. I even lifted one of the tiles once. Nothing. Just cold floor. The worst night of all came on October 23rd. I remember the date because it was the first night I seriously considered quitting, regardless of the paycheck. It was storming, hard, wind howling through the trees, rain pelting the windows so hard it sounded like gravel. No customers at all that night, just me, the buzzing lights, and the occasional rumble of thunder. I was halfway through my book when the power cut out. Everything went black. No overhead lights, no humming coolers, no soft buzz from the neon open sign. Just darkness and rain. I grabbed my flashlight from under the counter and flicked it on. As I turned the beam toward the front window, I saw him again. Standing outside, staring in, only this time his head was tilted at a sharp angle, like his neck had broken and never healed right. His mouth was wide open, as if screaming, but there was no sound, just his breath fogging the glass. I backed up, heart pounding. The flashlight flickered. He began tapping on the glass. Not banging, tapping, slowly, rhythmically. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Then he vanished. I mean that literally. He didn't walk away. He didn't run. 1 second he was there, tapping. The next, gone. No footprints, no shadows, nothing. The power came back 5 minutes later. I called the police. Told them someone had been harassing me at the gas station, maybe a mental health issue, maybe something worse. They sent a patrol car out around 4 a.m. The officer was nice enough, did a quick sweep, checked the woods, found nothing. But when he came back in, he looked uneasy. "I don't know if this means anything," he said, "but about 30 feet into the tree line, I found something odd." He held up a small plastic ID badge, cracked, weather-worn, but still legible. It belonged to a man named David Trent. Date of death, October 23rd, 2003. Exactly 12 years to the day. I took the badge and stared at the photo. It was the man from the store. I quit a week later. Told my manager I couldn't take the stress. He shrugged and said night shifts weren't for everyone. But before I left, I did some digging. Turns out David Trent used to work there. He was a night shift clerk, just like me. One night, he disappeared during a storm. His car was still in the lot, cash drawer untouched, no sign of forced entry. The only clue was a trail of footprints leading from the store to the woods, footprints that simply stopped halfway in, as if he'd vanished into thin air. They never found a body, never solved the case. The store quietly replaced him a week later. No press, no police follow-up, just silence. It's been years since then. I've moved to a different state, got a new job. I rarely tell this story anymore. People don't believe it, or they think I was just exhausted, hallucinating, maybe hitting the bottle. But every October, like clockwork, I get a call. Always blocked number, always around 217 AIM. No one on the other end. Just static. And a faint tapping. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I still dream about the gas station. I dream I'm inside, the power's out, and I can't move. He's outside staring in, mouth open, screaming silently. Waiting, and when I wake, there's condensation on my bedroom window. 3 fingerprints.